Welcome to the show No Instructions, where we meet with founders and interview them about starting and growing their businesses. I'm your host, Chad Ingram, three-time founder and CEO at Distro. Distro is a platform to help businesses build teams by breaking down borders around the world. Let's go ahead and get started with today's guest and see how they built their business. Welcome to the show No Instructions. Today we have Tyler Jennings with us. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me. It's fun to be here.
Yeah, for sure. It's great. This will be kind of cool. I don't know. I'm looking. I read up a little bit about your background, and I have to say I didn't know it very well. And so I'm kind of interested to just kind of learn how you got to this point in your life. So that'll be great. And also kind of funny. I used to be neighbors with your brother for a while, Troy.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So, and I put that together is that my daughter is going to preschool with.
At Tammy's place? Yes, let's go.
Yeah. So I just thought that was kind of funny.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway.
We live like 2 minutes away now. After they'd been in Singapore and we'd been in Connecticut, we both moved to Highland and American Fork. So
that's cool.
I was playing pickleball with Troy last night.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
He's a cool dude. Really good person. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing today. Just real short, then we'll come back to it a little bit later.
Yeah. I'm a partner at 2.0 Ventures, focused on investing in startups that are between 1 and 5 million in revenue. We like to lead that round, take a board seat. The way that we're different is we focus on helping them look at the variability and what a good exit looks like. Lots of VCs want you to go to be a unicorn. We're happy with scenarios where there might be a business that could get acquired for 100 million or 200 million. We're like, that's just fine.
Now, for the right cap table, that's a very successful outcome.
100%.
Right? Like, so there is a path where that makes a ton of sense. Now, there's probably some people listening thinking, wait a minute, selling a company for 100 million could have a bad outcome. and to some...
Isn't that so funny?
Yeah, it's super weird. But to some, like, equity structures and cap tables, like, there are investments and investors that are not designed to be successful in those numbers. Yeah. Isn't that weird?
It is amazing. And we can get into this later, but I've been a part of a lot of acquisitions where I was a strategic buying companies, and the world is the private equity world and the strategic investor world is way different than the VC world. Yeah. So bringing some of that element of optionality to founders who are new and don't understand, like, these are the different paths of how you can have an exit. Yep. We like to help and make sure it's not just unicorn or bust. Yeah. Which is too often in our world. That
is how almost all VCs look at it, which is kind of wild, right?
It's just disappointing.
And it's hard on the founder because, take this tangent, but I think it's relevant. It's hard on the founder because, the founder takes and assumes so much more risk because most startups don't sell for very, very large numbers. Mm-hmm. I mean, many still can get acquired for reasonable numbers, but not like you hear about in the news, right? So anyway, kind of wild. So how long have you been at the firm now?
Just this year. So it's new to me.
Yeah.
Played a few different roles, and I'm sure we'll get into the winding the road. But for me, the primary goal or objective in joining 2.0 was the creation of a better way of doing it. Mm-hmm. And I really believe that's true. I think there's a better way to partner with founders. There's a better way to, look at it instead of just one way, and this is the only way we can do it.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. So, all right. Let's dive into your story a little bit. Where does it start for you?
Yeah, as I look back on my life, there's been a couple defining characteristics or things that caused my life to take a certain path.
Sure.
One of that was being the oldest of 6 kids in an 8-year period or 7.5-year period. So I was immediately and always forced into a role of leadership and kind of being the person in charge. So I've always been a leader.
So are you saying that, like, with your siblings, you guys came real tight together?
No twins. Everybody's really tight together. Wow. The closest is 13 months. The farthest apart is like 22.
Yeah, that's like multiple sets of Irish twins. Right?
100%. 100%.
That's so wild.
At this point in my life, I absolutely love all the relationships we have. We're between the ages of 42 and 34. So that is so much fun. We have 22 grandkids for my parents now in that group of 6 of us. So, and all of them are between 15 and a baby, but there's 18 between 15 and 5.
Wow.
There were 6 kids all born in 1 year. So all of us had a kid in the year 2017.
It's a stacked family.
Yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
we're going to Aspen Grove in a couple weeks, and it's just going to be an insane party.
So, all right. So you're the oldest, right? And I mean, but really there's not even a big age gap, even to the youngest.
Even to the youngest, there's not a big age gap.
And
the second part, and why that makes that structure so challenging for me, was we moved a lot as kids. I went to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different schools.
Why did you move so much?
My dad was corporate McDonald's. So I grew up in a home where we always had Happy Meals. I had every, Happy Meal toy display that you'd ever want, but we ate a lot of cheeseburgers and nuggets, and we lived in California, Mexico City, Chicago, Virginia, North Carolina, all with the corporate life.
Did you like that?
As a kid, I would say I disliked it more than I liked it.
Yeah.
When I look back at it now and we talk about what makes me me and where does my story start, 100% my life is not the same if I don't build the muscle of being the new kid, of having to start over and having to eat lunch by myself in the library or sometimes in a bathroom stall because I didn't know anyone.
Yeah.
And for me, being a very social person who really relies on friends, and that was moments of empathy that I had to gain for people who feel socially ostracized or out there. Yeah. So I think my default person would have been somebody who was more cliquey. Yeah. But because of my experience, it made me more inclusive.
Interesting.
So it is kind of interesting how we are wired a certain way, but experiences can definitely open our eyes. I was 9 and 10 when I lived in Mexico City. Wow. McDonald's paid for a home for our family. So we had 5 stories, everything was marble in the house, trees inside the house, beautiful home. We had a maid.
There.
Yes. It was incredible. But at the same time, you walk out of our gated neighborhood and it's the poorest of the poor. And
How old were you in Mexico City, roughly?
9, 10 years old.
Yeah, old enough to start understanding.
I remember it. I understand it, but it was very influential to how I looked at life and how much more gratitude I had.
That's really interesting because even looking at where were you at in California?
So we lived in 3 different places:
okay.
The Bay Area, the Central Valley, and then Southern.
Okay, cool. Where in Southern California?
So
that's where I'm from.
Yeah, I lived in Carlsbad.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So, looking, let's say you're in California for a while, then you go to, North Carolina or vice versa.
Yeah.
These are very different places.
Cultures are different.
Yeah. You could almost describe it like you're in a different country almost.
100%. 100%.
So then Mexico City, how did your mom, I mean, maybe you understand it differently now as an adult, but how do you think your mom, handled a lot of those changes?
Yeah. If there's anyone in my life who's made the biggest impact, it's her.
Yeah.
Another way that I would describe my story is my mom was the person who, even though she had 6 kids in 8 years, let people who were in need of a place take over my bedroom. As a teenager, can you imagine this? Asking a kid to do this today. Yeah. As a teenager, I was kicked out of my room and I slept on my younger sister's trundle bed.
Yeah.
And that's where I slept for probably 6 to 9 months.
Because she was nice.
Because she was nice, and there was somebody who needed, and she was always you ask, the best example, this is probably the best. Our home in North Carolina, after we moved, the friends of the kids would park at our house to just go back and remember those feelings.
Wow.
Of how much love they felt there. Wow. My friends now from my high school days in Virginia will reach out to me and be like, I still remember your mom's chocolate chip cookies. I still remember how she made me feel. And the amount of love and care she's shown is angelic. And for me, one of the best examples I have for how I want to live my life.
That's really awesome. Who do you think you are naturally more like your father or your mother?
So I would say I'm a pretty interesting blend. I have my mom's desire to be around people. My dad's more introverted.
Yeah.
He is intellectually, he and I vibe very well.
Yeah.
Emotionally, my mom and I vibe very well.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think I'm a decent mix of the two of them in terms of what it's created for me and the opportunities it's presented.
Yeah, that's cool. And your mom didn't work, right? Or she
No,
was
correct. Yeah,
stay-at-home
she was a stay-at-home mom. As we got older and everybody was out of the house, she did start doing some side things, if you will.
Sure.
But never full time.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to see like everyone's family dynamic is so different, right? And that makes each one of us very, very unique.
Yeah.
You know, some have parents who both worked. Some have parents who, you know, some stayed home, you know, at different times of life. You know, sibling dynamics, I think, are huge, you know?
Yeah.
You know, so let's talk about your siblings a little bit. Like, if you're the oldest, you know, did everyone kind of run that path of going to school and climbing, you know, so to speak, a corporate ladder, or have you guys all kind of done very different things?
Yeah, no, it's, I would say with a lot of love is not a lot of structure.
Yeah.
Right. Like those two things don't generally coexist. I was naturally wired to, like my parents never helped me with college applications. Like, you know, there's some parents who like do those things. Like I went out of my way to go seek out University of North Carolina and Duke and Georgetown and Wake Forest and UVA, all these schools around where I was. That was not something that you had to push me for. I was naturally inclined to want to excel, but I was also lazy when it came to homework because I thought it was boring. Yeah. So like if I were to like define, I was the kid who could do a standardized test and not miss a whole lot, but also was just bored at school.
Yeah. Well, okay. So that would have been the next question is like, did school come easy to you or was it forceful?
No, yeah. School was easy for me.
Okay.
I was the kid who would study the night before the test and do well.
Yeah.
But I would say that's not how all of us are wired. We all come out differently. So from a parenting perspective, what worked for me, you know, which maybe it was a bad example, didn't necessarily work for the ones later on.
Yeah.
So
well, you were the experiment, right?
Yeah,
you're the oldest.
Totally.
Right. So a lot of stuff didn't work.
Totally. A lot of stuff didn't work. The house was crazy, as you can imagine, in terms of like the amount of activities and the amount of things. And talking to my siblings now, I was rarely at home once I had a driver's license.
Yeah, cool.
I was in an activity or I was working. I was one who, like,
not from an avoidance perspective, but just that you were busy.
No, I was busy. I was interested. I wanted to have money. I wanted to be able to pay for a car. You know, in that situation where there's 6 of us in 8 years and I'm the oldest, like I knew I wasn't gonna be the one that was getting all the capital.
Yeah.
I was gonna have to fend for myself. So, you know, part of that is pretty much since I've been out of the house and even before, I've paid for almost all my own things.
Yeah.
I was jealous of my friends who didn't have to work during college. You know, I was jealous of the friends that had everything kind of given to them.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't trade it, you know, looking back now on what it did from a work ethic standpoint, what it did from a discipline standpoint.
Yeah, definitely.
So everybody's going to be a little different.
Do you think that was because, like, how much of that was due to your nature of figuring it out yourself and just going and figuring it out versus like your parents saying, "No, we're not going to do that for you. You go do that on your own."
I think so, you know, fast forwarding, like the part of the story that's relevant is my dad moved to North Carolina to buy 5 McDonald's. To go buy 5 of his own. Yeah. So he went from being corporate to, you know, wanting to become a franchiser.
That's a believer.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's a cool story.
But the downside to it is the guy who owned the stores, ended up selling them directly to McDonald's instead and kind of cutting out my dad.
No.
Yeah. So this happens while I'm in college.
And I think maybe, I mean, I used to watch the franchise list years ago, but McDonald's was a very high performing franchise if you could get one.
100%.
You know, I think they've been dethroned now by Chick-fil-A, but like they're extremely high performing.
Extremely high performing, extremely profitable.
Yep.
And he was kind of done with corporate. And I think in a way, corporate was kind of pissed at him and so decided to make a Godfather offer that was better than what he was going to pay out over a period of time. And so long story short, like there wasn't a choice. I would say I was wired that way, but there also wasn't a choice.
So I want to double click into that though with your dad. So about how old were you and your dad was like, I want to go, take this leap and buy some franchises?
Yeah. So it was in between my junior and senior year. I moved my senior year of high school.
Okay, so the family needs money at this point, right? There's a bunch of teenagers. They're all expensive. They eat way too much, like all the stuff, right? The activities all cost money. Like, your parents can only take certain types of risks at this point in their life, right? And I think it's important for people to understand, right? The younger you are, the crazier you can be about things, and starting companies and all that. So that was a big risk for your dad at that point in his life to do that.
Yeah.
What do you think have you ever talked to him about this? Like, what do you think drew him into be like, I want to go from a steady paycheck that was probably healthy to go take a bunch of risk?
Well, I just to clarify that there a little bit, I don't know that it was necessarily a ton of risk. He was still going to be on salary and they were going to like share the earnings in it. But I think from his perspective, he was just done with corporate life, the political elements of it. Like I talk about being an introvert, being social. I would say one of the things in terms of doing well inside of a corporate structure is understanding the power dynamics, understanding the political elements of this. Mm-hmm. And he always optimized for his performance was going to be his talking. And that only gets you so far in big company life. Yeah. You can be a good performer, but if you haven't built relationships and if you don't understand all the variables at play and you don't look at that as a game of chess, you will underperform. And so I think if he's like looking back at it now, he probably felt underappreciated and wanted to do his own thing and probably would have performed better without having a boss.
Do you feel like, ultimately, him looking back, and this is your opinion of him, right? Not his opinion, but do you feel like he was an entrepreneur, like at heart, and he just kind of ended up with maybe some golden handcuffs at McDonald's corporate? I definitely think there's some truth there. I came to the family when he was still in school. Yeah. So McDonald's offered him a job and, I think there would have been multiple times where he probably would have liked to walk away, but then there's 5 behind me. Yep. And you kind of get locked into a path. Yeah. So, totally. And, post McDonald's life, he's ended up, participating in a lot of restaurant chains and helping a lot of people scale. And now he's a full-time consultant and helps brands with real estate and, growth. And he consults people who have between 3 and 5 locations and helps them trying to figure out how do you go to the next. One of the cool things he did do during McDonald's was acquire Chipotle. So he's a part of the team that bought Chipotle in the mid 90s when there was only like 10 locations in Denver. Yeah. And they had the vision to scale Chipotle to, what it was over the next 20 years. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah. So, all right, you graduate high school. In Virginia? North Carolina. North Carolina. Yeah. So lived in North Carolina for 1 year and then decided. Your senior year. Yeah. All new friends. All new friends. It's rough. Yeah. All new friends. It was rough. Was it fun though? Do you remember having fun your senior year? The first couple of weeks were rough. I went from a place where me and my 4 friends were the Fab Five, right? I went from the place where that had been hard. We were in a nice situation. And you go to starting over. Eventually, figured it out, but I don't wish that on anyone. That's a lot. That is tough. It is tough on kids too. And you're still a kid, even though you're 17 or 18 or whatever, right? So you graduate high school. Is it very clear to you that you want to go to university? Yeah. I knew for sure that I wanted to get an education. I knew from watching my dad's experience, actually, that he had not finished school. He went to he got into jobs and he would be presenting to the CEO of McDonald's on different initiatives, but he always felt that there were some parts of his education that had held him back in terms of how he was perceived. So I may be over indexed on education. If I'm talking to my kids now, I don't know that I would say that you have to get an MBA. You over index on your education? I would say maybe. Okay. Yeah. All right. So you went pretty deep, and now you're saying I want my children to go a little deeper, even. Yeah, no. Just to be safe.
Yeah. or I don't know that I would say like, I felt like I needed to get an MBA. I felt like I knew before I even went to college that I was going to do a degree and then I was going to get an advanced degree later. That's something that I had wired myself into. I don't know if that's the path now, especially with AI. And I think so many ways that education is going to change.
Yeah.
And what's useful and what are the skills that you need. I'm actually helping my son as a 14-year-old now start a company because awesome. I think it's much more important for him to build grit and resilience than it is anything else.
So I know somebody who talked with their son, turned 18 and graduating high school. This was last year or maybe 2 years ago. But anyway, he gave him the option. He said, we have a budget we've saved to help you with school, or we can utilize that money and go buy a business. And he said not start one. He actually said to find and buy something, small, relatively manageable. And the kid chose to buy the business.
That's interesting.
And the way he shared this story is he showed a picture of his son moving a forklift by himself. And he was running this like shipping business that they bought. And I thought that was the coolest freaking thing in the world, because you can look at that and say, a very risk averse person might look at that and say, well, what if he fails? Great. He will still learn more than had he studied business for 4 years in with textbooks that were, 6 years old. You know what I'm saying? By the time
1,000%.
And so regardless of how that goes, that kid will be so far ahead of other people, his peers.
I'm a huge believer that you fail early, get experience, getting back up, build resilience, build grit. They want their goal is to be the lonely ghost for boys. So like the idea and that look and feel, but for teenage boys from a clothing standpoint. And he's like, I'm not sure I want to do it. I'm scared. I'm like, but that's perfect. You should feel that.
Right.
Like that's exactly the right feeling. If it was easy and there wasn't uncertainty, then like, what's life about? Like, this is the chance for you to try. There's a guy named Kurt Doman who was nice enough to give them $1,000 to be the early funding. And that is just so invaluable from a personal development standpoint.
What's funny is you say, like, you repeat, I'm scared. I don't know. I'm nervous. Like, those are the same feelings you have when you're 30 or 40.
It doesn't go away.
Just do it now.
100%. Build the muscle of feeling fear.
Yeah.
Build the muscle of being uncertain. Yeah. Build the muscle of trying. Sid Tetros posted something yesterday that really kind of stuck with me, but it's this idea like forward for growth or back to safety.
Yeah.
Like in our world today, like my biggest fear for teens and what I see the most is the anxiety and depression around trying and like fear and failure. Totally. Like we have to build that muscle. That is so important.
I think we make, like, again, this is a tangent, but I think that we make life very easy for ourselves and thereby for our children. Like, it's so easy for us to like handle things, or, oh, they need this. All right, Amazon, boom, it's at the porch in the morning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
everything's so convenient.
Boom. Right. But it removes like a lot of the natural ability to work for things or wait for things or have to be patient for things. Like, and so there's definitely some problems with a lot of the conveniences I think that we have in our lives.
From a personal development standpoint, 100%.
Yeah, definitely. There's trade-offs in everything we do, right? Of course, now I love getting stuff at my door the next day. It's freaking great.
100%.
But there's trade-offs. Okay, so it's clear you want to go to school. Where do you go to your undergrad?
Yeah, so I came out here to BYU. My parents went there. They met there. I had kind of talked it up in my mind.
Where are they from?
My mom was from California,
okay,
and my dad was from Kansas.
Oh, yeah, cool. So they were not like Utah natives.
No, not Utah natives. I wasn't a Utah native. I am beyond grateful for my time there. My best friends in life I met as a 18-year-old in the dorms.
Yeah.
We still get together. I just, was in Cabo with one of them last week. Cool. Go and do a sauna and cold plunge in one of the other one's houses, most Fridays. So, and we all were from other parts of the country. One in New Hampshire, one in Colorado, one in Texas. And we've all found our way back to Utah over the last, 5 to 10 years. Me, the last 4.
Also, if you're not from Utah and you're listening, Utah's terrible and don't come here.
Very true.
Just kidding. But
Very true. But no, it is amazing. I never would have said I would live in Utah as an adult.
Yeah.
That was not on my radar whatsoever. Yeah. I left Utah after a couple years after school because I thought I had to go get a job and then work at a big company. But who would have known like what the 2010s would have been for Utah? Yeah,
totally. So what was your area of study, or would you focus on your degree?
Yeah, I did economics with like a global certificate in business. I loved my time in Mexico. I loved the idea of international business. I loved the idea of having a global footprint and getting to work with people from all over the world. So that was like something that I was passionate about, and I think led to a little bit of why I ended up doing what I did.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so I knew I was a business-minded person, but I also knew I wanted to get an MBA, so I didn't want to do a business major.
Interesting.
Because I was like, it was just going to repeat the content.
Did the MBA follow immediately after graduating?
I did it while I was working.
Okay.
So if there was something that I would caution people that I would probably messed up on is I optimized for no debt. I worked my entire time during college. I was a waiter, pretty much the whole time. I went to an MBA program where my company paid for it. Like I've always been, because maybe I've been on my own and I didn't have kind of a parachute or backup if I failed.
Right.
I've always,
especially being the oldest, right?
Especially being the oldest, I've always optimized for no debt and low risk from like a financial decision.
Why do you think that was? Like what really was the, like, getting into that mindset, what really was the cause of that, you think? Did you see any sort of like famine at times in your life, or did you, I don't know, like, were there any insecurities potentially about how you might do it? Like, how did that work?
No, I think it was a little bit of a fixed mindset. It was a little bit of a fear-based approach. Yeah. If I could go back and help 42-year-old Tyler tell 24-year-old Tyler, I would say, take the risks earlier. I did start a business at a BYU.
Right.
So I did take some risk.
Yep.
But I would have leaned in harder, I guess. And I would have had a bigger vision earlier. I've loved my career. I've had great experiences. I would say that I've over-optimized for security versus like risk and upside.
Right. And the truth is like, it's okay to look back and learn, I think, from different ways that we do things, but like, there's more than one way to do something, right?
Of course.
So,
and that's not to say like, I feel like I did it wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I've loved everything about it. Like, the experience has been fantastic, but I do also understand like in terms of what makes me the happiest and where I feel the most value and the most personal enjoyment.
Yeah.
It wasn't, in big company life growing 3 to 5% and having people get mad at me if I had a 15% growth quarter or like a 25% growth quarter, because it was going to make the next quarter harder. Like, exactly. I'm not wired that way.
Which would have been so different. Okay, so let's go back to the end of BYU. And at what point do you get married? Are you in school or is it after school?
So it's my last semester.
Really?
I'm taking management communications. It's a business writing class. Yeah. I'm one of like.
This was before ChatGPT also.
100%.
Okay.
I actually had to write. There was 50 dudes and 5 girls in the class. And my wife was one of the 5 girls during her spring term. So if I was a social butterfly, I was the person that people called about where are the parties, what's going on.
Yeah. And if you still are. Yeah.
It's what I enjoy. It's what I enjoy. So like if I look back, I had some squirrel issues. Like I had a hard time staying focused. So spring term was actually fantastic timing. I feel like it had to have kind of worked that way where I felt some sense of urgency and that there was not as many distractions. So I met my wife. She was dating someone at the time. They'd been dating for a year. I told her like, hey, whenever you break up with this guy, let me know. I'd love to take you out.
Just because there's a goalie doesn't mean you can't score, right?
That's right.
That's basically what he said.
Yeah. So towards the end of the semester, she's like, hey, I broke up with this guy. I'm like, all right, great. Let's go out. So she told me on a Monday. We went out on a Wednesday. And then just we're together ever since.
That's so awesome. Where's she from?
She's from Arizona.
Cool. And was she studying business too?
Mm-hmm. Okay. She was an accountant. She did accounting.
Very cool. Yeah. Also great program. She's probably really smart then.
She's bright.
BYU has
smarter than me for sure.
I think it's top 3.
Yeah, I think number 1 or number 2.
Yeah, number 1 or number 2 usually in the country for accounting. So pretty wild. Did she end up working in accounting?
She did work at a CPA firm for a while.
Did she do a Big 4 route or go a little more
she went more localized.
Cool.
There was a decent chance that we were going to move, and so she didn't want to have her thing be locked in.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she's incredible. She's starting a business now, but she took 15 years off from like business life, and now she's doing a startup, and it's fun.
That's super fun. Okay, so you get married. Tell us about this business that you started.
Yeah, so I did a summer of selling security door to door.
Yeah.
Once again, back to my low risk, make money. Graduate from college debt free, had a nice car that I paid off, all because I was able to make enough money during a summer.
Yep.
And so after that, I'm starting to look at what are the trends, what's happening, where's technology going. And for me, I look at it and I see home technology, home automation becoming a thing. My brother-in-law, my younger sister's husband, they had moved to Arizona. He was working at an installation company that was doing security systems and lights and, imagine home theaters and that kind of stuff. Right. So he and I partner on doing that in Utah. We're like, how are we going to get people to believe in a couple of 20 somethings? And so what we did is we convinced my dad's friend, who was a professional golfer, to let us deck out his house at cost. So we bought the components, he paid for them, but we were like, hey, if you'll let us use your house when you're out golfing to show people, like we'll give this to you for free. So we went from 0 to $1.5 million in sales in the first year.
Wow.
Absolutely like off to the races. I was super pumped. We did so well that we actually, this is kind of a funny story. I convinced the person who was building the International Builder Show home in Vegas. I went down to his office, and I was like, hey, you don't have any like high-end technology in this house. You're about to have, 10,000 builders walk through it. What if I get it to you for free? And I convinced like Microsoft and Lutron and all these big names to do it. And so sure enough, he's like, if you can do that, you're in. So we ended up being the integrator, putting in convincing very big brands and to do a couple $100,000 worth of, freebies for us. That's
really cool.
And so I was really excited. This is like end of 2000, beginning of 2008. But I learned a really hard lesson. Like the macro, for those who don't know, financial crisis happens that year. The residential real estate market absolutely goes to zero.
And you learned a huge lesson in economics that you've been studying for a while.
Yep. The macro always wins.
Yeah.
And so even though we were, doing well and things were going well, you can't stop when your people who are building $2 million vacation homes or $3 million vacation homes tell you that the banks pulled their loan.
Yeah.
And we don't have the capital right now to continue building this up.
Did you feel happy building that little business?
I loved it. It was a ton of fun.
Yeah.
I saw like we were profitable. We were doing 35% margin on that revenue. And so I felt like it was kind of snatched from me.
Yeah.
It was there. I saw the trend. If anything, I was a little early, but I saw where it could go. I saw the potential, and I was really like excited about what it could be.
Yeah. Isn't that kind of wild how like something can work, but not right now?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important for people to understand. Like,
100%.
It's just like you said, the macroeconomics always win, right? You're going to be affected by that no matter what. I remember feeling lucky that I actually moved back into country from Colombia. I was living there for a couple of years as a missionary. And I came back literally 2 or 3 weeks after the stock market had just crashed in October.
Oh, wow.
And my dad, who was a small business owner, was extremely affected by it. It was the most poor I think I had ever seen him, the most stressed about cash I think that I had ever seen him. And I remember looking back and thinking, like after a couple years, because it took a couple years for the economy to start digging out of that, I remember thinking, I am so lucky that I'm not starting my adult life, or didn't start my adult life 2 years ago. Isn't that kind of wild? Right?
100%.
That in starting my first company, a few years later, kind of on the upswing of the next economic rise. So.
Yeah. No, and I look back at that a lot, And there are a lot of lessons to be learned, but I think the most important one is not to get down on yourself because something fails.
Yeah.
I think there were moments where I was like, really frustrated with that. But you have to kind of accept that, you can't foresee all the things.
How old were you then?
24, 25.
Yeah, you were young.
Yeah.
So you guys decide to stop doing that. Sales are gone.
Yeah. Sales are gone.
Right.
The things that we had done, the income that we had coming wasn't going to be there. Because
this was a luxury item technically, right?
100%. Our average bill of material was $100,000 to $200,000 in the home.
Right.
This was not small potatoes. Yeah. We were dealing with big houses. So it was at an interesting point. I would say, like, if there's any point that's kind of what's next, I had talked to Todd Peterson about home automation, and Todd was at Apex Alarm at the time. Yep. And Todd had been through our show home. He was building a home in Orem. Kind of started pitching him the idea of like home automation bundling and how this could help Apex.
What did he say?
Well, he introduced me to Jim Nye, who was a fresh out of MBA BYU student. And we had a few meetings. I was offered a job by them.
Wow.
At that time. I had a scholarship to go to Arizona State Law School, or I had an offer to join a large multinational company. And so this all happened over a 2 or 3 month period at the end of 2008, beginning of 2009.
Right.
And at the time, like, Apex is not a huge company.
Oh, they were kind of
small. They were kind of small. There had been a few, like,
might have had a couple hundred salespeople.
Yeah. But it was uncertain. Yeah. Law school is not me, but it would have been really safe.
Yeah.
And this large company was kind of in between the two.
Yeah.
And back to my international business interests, like, it was global. Yeah. Headquarters was in France. North American headquarters was Connecticut. I was going into a space where there was code and law that required what I was going to be selling. So I could see a wave. I could see a trend coming that would be beneficial to my success.
To go and get your
to join the large company. Sorry, to join the large company. I joined as a regional sales manager. I knew that there was going to be tailwinds helping me as I went there. So that's what I ended up choosing to do. They had said they'd pay for an MBA, help me accomplish some of my goals with that. And once again, debt-free Tyler.
I got you.
Yeah. So ended up doing that, and we moved to Florida.
Wow. What part of Florida?
We were in Orlando.
Cool.
So we, as a newly married couple, maybe a year or two married, we're living next to Disney World. We go there, after work, and we do a couple rides and eat dinner.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
That's cool. That's cool. Also a very different place, but you had experience moving around, right? Mm-hmm. How was that for your wife?
I would say it was a challenge.
Very different from Arizona.
Very different than from Arizona. Much more humid, but still hot. So that part was but flat.
Like, literally, you drive over an overpass in Florida, and you can look out and see 50 miles.
Yes, 100%.
It's crazy.
It's very, very flat. It's very different. I think at the end of the day, what we've both learned after our moves, because we didn't stop moving for a good period of time, was that it's really not so much about where, and it's about your attitude and the relationships you make.
Yeah.
You can be happy anywhere.
Yeah. It's
just a matter of, do you choose to lean in? Do you choose to, you and I met last year.
Yeah.
Like, we haven't known each other for long.
Yeah.
But that's just, it's a matter of what you choose to do. I could sit back and not get to know anyone.
Right.
Or I can choose to reach out and lean in.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the choices we all make in life.
Yeah.
Sure. And I think it's generally where that is not really relevant.
I think, and I think just categorically, looking at that, a lot of aspects of life, just being willing to lean in, because it really says learn more, right?
Yeah.
Like,
are you curious?
Yeah.
Like, what's your attitude? Like, my tagline is adventure awaits. Like, I believe that's always true.
Yeah.
If you look for it, if you choose it, if you want to sit back and be comfortable and be safe, then that's your choice.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But that's not fun.
Yeah, right. So how long are you at this company, and how long are you in Florida?
Yeah, so I end up spending the next dozen years at this company.
Wow.
And
a long time for a millennial.
It's a long time for a millennial. It was a long time for me. The thing that drew me to it, and the reason why I stayed, I played a role in sales. I played a role in strategy and business development. I played a role in product and product management. I played a role in mergers and acquisitions. I played a role in, like, all of the fun things that you could do inside of a big company. So it's kind of like, I looked at it as a sandbox, and I was going to learn a bunch, and no two roles were the same.
Right.
And I just had so much fun. I was on a team of 5 people. Probably if I were to talk about what accelerated my career, is I took a risk. I joined my business unit I was selected within my business unit to go to corporate headquarters and represent our interests in a 5-person team who was going to talk about what should Legrand be and what should be next and what can we go build.
Right.
And so every month I was reporting to the CEO and all of the division presidents.
Yeah, it's a large company.
Yeah, it's a large company. It's 37,000 employees. Yeah. And I'm this, younger guy who's holding his own and performing well in front of the big bosses.
That's awesome.
And so from there, because I have that opportunity and I show some promise, I was fast-tracked in terms of the opportunities I got from that.
Okay, so that's great. And did you feel energized with those opportunities? Like the way you're describing it now, did that make you feel any sense of happiness in doing those things?
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I loved the people I got to interact with. I loved the scale at which we were talking about. The strategy documents and the strategy thesis that we came up with turned into billions of dollars in revenue for the company. That's awesome. When I look back at the annual reports now, they talk about the data center business and its growth. And, that was my last job was, being a leader within the data center world.
So at what points, in your time there, like, did you feel any sense of dissatisfaction or like maybe weren't, or any sense of maybe not challenged enough? Did you ever feel that way?
Oh,
and
of course.
If so, when?
100%.
If so, why?
Well, I would say I always felt throughout that whole experience, even though I really leaned in, and for anybody who does decide to go to a company, I would like to submit that you have a major and a minor. Mm. You have the day job that pays, that you get, your annual report on, but your minor should be the thing that you're doing extra that is helping you learn something new. Mm. So throughout my whole time there, I always made sure I had a minor. And the minor was the thing that led me to the next major. So I would say I was generally unfulfilled, and I was generally never felt like I was giving 100%, kind of like school, if I can go back and say it. It was kind of like school. And even if I did really well, my upside was always capped. And so the capped upside eventually gnaws at you. The grow at a certain rate, but no more grow, kind of gnaws at you. Yeah. So even though one of the things that I really enjoyed was getting to know the entrepreneurs that we would acquire. So we were a very acquisitive company. We bought, dozens of companies while I was there, and getting to know the new teams and the new founders and watching them, integrate. And, in many cases, one of my jobs was I would go to the businesses that we would acquire and I would talk to them about their product roadmap and their innovation strategy. And I was on the innovation team. I led the day-to-day innovation, and I was like the internal consultant, if you will. So I got to see all of these business units. They were doing somewhere between 25 and $250 million in revenue. And we talk about what's their product roadmap and what are the products that are, they're going to be their engines for growth, and which ones are the ones that are going to kind of die off, but are the cash cows. Yeah. So I got to do this process with founders all the time.
With M&A, I'm assuming you were on the acquisition team, corporate dev?
So there wasn't a corporate dev team per se. The CEO would just pull people in for minors. Interesting. So that was a ton of fun for me.
That is kind of cool. That's a cool way to look at that. How often were you guys successful in the purchases? And
we did 2 or 3 a year.
Okay.
Yeah. We did 2 or 3, some cases 5 deals a year.
Yeah.
So it was always happening. It was
but were the acquisitions successful, would you say? Like post-acquisition in general?
Yeah. Yes, I would say so. And the primary reasons that was true is we did not mess up the leadership team from the company. We let them continue to operate relatively independent. The things that we did is we would always make sure that it was we had a channel that would benefit their already existing channels. Right. It wasn't, we always could add more to them. And then they always get the benefits of our scale from a cost structure. So we could make them more profitable and give them more revenue because we had complementary business lines.
So you were in Florida this whole time, or you guys kind of moved around as well?
I haven't lived one place more than 4 years my whole life.
That's kind of wild.
Yeah. And
how about your current house? Do we forecast?
Yes, we forecast staying here.
Okay.
Relationship wise, the deal was that once our kids got to middle school, we'd stop moving. So
remind me how many kids you have?
We have 4.
You have 4 kids.
And the oldest, when we moved here, was just turning 12.
Wow.
So we've been done moving. We're done moving. I'll be here for the next
Knock
20
on
years.
wood.
Yeah. No, I don't even need to knock on wood.
Yeah,
The wife is not moving.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So we'll be here the next 20. But yeah, so we lived in Florida, we lived in San Diego, and we lived in Connecticut.
San Diego's great.
San Diego's
still
fantastic.
like a beautiful pocket of California that's not too crazy right now.
100%.
Yeah, it's beautiful down there. So, all right, you leave Legrand, you come back to Utah at some point, right?
Mm-hmm. During COVID.
During COVID.
Yeah.
Oh, you work for another company while you're here for a while, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Who was that?
It was so the way I got recruited out was there was a European company that needed a North American leader.
Got it.
So Legrand was not going to let me leave the multi-100 person team that was headquartered in Connecticut.
Yeah.
So I had to, if I was going to move, I needed to have a job that could be remote.
Right.
And so when they reached out, I was interested, and it was in the same place I'd already executed a few times. Mm-hmm. So help them build a team, help them build a market strategy, all that kind of good stuff. But I knew it was a stepping stone for me to get back to building.
Yeah.
And that's really why I wanted to get to Utah. You know, an aside that I should mention is I was coming out here once or twice a year. That whole time I didn't live in Utah.
Your family ended up here.
So
right?
my parents are here. A few of my siblings are here. And so we'd come out in the summer, we'd come out during Christmas. And my brother worked for Ryan Smith at Qualtrics, and Ryan and I were friendly from BYU days. Yeah. So Troy worked at Qualtrics. We'd come out here. Every year or two, they were in a new office. Yeah. They had moved. Ryan was doing something new. And so Ryan and I would touch base. I'd see Troy. We'd hang out. And watching what was that growth and watching all the other companies.
Great example of what could happen.
100%. 100%. And so that for me was like, wow, there's something happening here and I want to be a part of it. Like, I want to get in this game because this is, I'm so bullish on the next 20 years of Utah. I would bet on it every day.
Yeah.
And so this was just a no-brainer for me in terms of, and I also think the market's small enough, if I'm being honest, that you could have an impact. It's not the Bay Area.
Definitely.
It's not the Bay Area. I could move here and have an impact.
Yeah, definitely.
And so that was exciting too.
Yeah. And your wife and family seemed pretty happy about moving here as well.
Yeah, everybody was on board. I think it's been an incredible move for all of us. And, I think just all the opportunities and options that exist here aren't going to slow down, and it's exciting.
So how are you feeling now, being a full-time investor? In doing this now, been open about it here for a few months, but how does that feel? It's a little different than what you were doing before.
Yeah, no,
not very different, but a little different.
It is a little different, and I think that's probably the most fun for me. Is the things that I enjoy the most are mentoring and coaching and helping people in their careers. I enjoy the high level strategy questions and helping put the pieces together. Yeah. I love the idea of here's where we're at, here's where we need to get to. What are the steps in between to get from here to there? Yep. And laying that out, I've done that project so many times with so many businesses. It just feels like second nature for me to do it now in a position where I'm not, and the business isn't capped. Yeah. And that for me is the, realization of a lot of goals and a lot of my life's passions.
What are you enjoying about, I asked that in a very pointed way, I guess, but what are you enjoying about working on, I imagine, a very small team compared to
a huge
very large team with tens of thousands of employees?
So I think the biggest part is every choice you make has impact. And because we're a small team and we're partners, the conversations are very open and there's no dictator structure. It's are we in or are we out on this one? Yeah. If we're in, why? Yeah. Okay, let's go. Yeah. And so then we roll up the sleeves and we get in. We've been a fractional CFO for most of the companies that are in the portfolio. We're very focused on helping them prepare for all of the parts of what it's going to take to get from the current size of 1 to 5 to 25.
So is that where you guys really target an acquisition in the 20 to 25 range?
Yeah, because I think
them there at least.
If you can get from 5 to 25 in a couple year window, that gives you a really nice multiple. And the 25 to 50 or the 25 to 100 is, I think, much more challenging than the 5 to 25.
Interesting.
Like, I think there is a sweet spot from an acquisition standpoint.
Yeah.
When you've shown a few good years of growth, and the multiple you can get there is potentially more advantageous than what it takes to get to the next part of that.
Sure.
And I've seen multiple times where you got to 25 and you raised to C, and you really wish you would have taken the deal. I have a good friend of mine who had a valuation in, let's call it the $400 million range a couple years ago. And he had the choice to either sell at that valuation or take the round at that valuation. And he rused the day he didn't take the sell versus the, the raising of the round.
It's wild. I've seen that multiple times, especially in the last couple of years as the tech market and multiples got impacted so hard.
And the VCs often aren't wanting you to do that.
For sure.
Yeah.
They want you to keep
you haven't hit their targets. You haven't hit their internal measures of success.
Yeah.
So I think, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah. Totally.
And I think that's one of the things that makes it fun.
Yeah.
Is we want to be your partner, and we're totally happy with some variable outside of it being $1 billion exit.
That's really awesome. So what advice would you have for, founders and listeners? Don't just have to be founders, but I mean, really anybody exploring either being an entrepreneur or a team member that has impact, what advice would you have for them, earlier on in their career?
The number one thing I can see is create value.
Yeah.
Ask, how can I help? What's a burden that you have on your plate that I can take off, whether that's to potential customers or to the founders of the team or your boss.
Yeah.
Like, whatever it is, if you lean in, you will always do better. I can't, you've been to a few of the dinners I do now.
Yeah. And they're great. I like them. I get hit by so many networking events and stuff, but it's you. I mean, you curate a good group of people.
And it blows people's minds when I'm not charging for it.
Yeah.
Or I'm not trying to get anything from them.
Yeah.
I literally do it because I just love, and it comes back to my mom. I love bringing people together. I love creating value. I love being someone that is useful.
Yeah.
And that is just my core, what makes me happiest. And so you wanted the other part I would say is try and find your zone of genius. What are the things that you are uniquely good at and you love doing? Yeah. And try and spend as much time there as you possibly can. Yeah. If you can find that job or that line of work, then you'll always love waking up and going and doing it. Because if you are just mediocre at your job, or it's not something that you really love, you're going to feel sad, and it's going to impact all other areas of your life. So that's what I really look at the next 20 years of my life is, how can I spend the most time possible in my zone of genius? How can I do the things that I'm uniquely good at? There's a lot of good operators. There's a lot of good people who can build businesses. Yeah. There's not as many people who are good at the things that I'm good at.
Yeah.
And so how can I lean in there? Yeah. And, hopefully impact someone for good.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity yesterday to spend time with the UVU entrepreneurship director in their program.
Yeah.
And talking to them about what are you guys trying to accomplish? How can I be helpful? There's so many things that when you show some level of competency and willing to lean in, new doors get opened up. Because I was willing to open up and try, so many doors have been opened. And I think the impact I'll be able to have because I was willing to lean in is not capped. And that at the end of the day is what makes me most happy. I have sufficient capital. I don't need money. Yeah. I just want to have a life where I can look back and, say that I did something. Yeah. And I hope people and my kids at my funeral say, Dad was one of those guys who was always looking to help and was loved relationships and built relationships and served people. Yeah. I hope I impact kids for good. Maybe one of the happiest days of my life was just a few months ago when we had 7 groups of teens pitch the Sharks. And
I heard about that.
And it was just it was so meaningful for me when the parents of these kids come up to me or email me afterwards and be like, that was a night that changed my 12-year-old's life. And I get a little emotional thinking about it because that at the end of the day is what brings me joy, is having the opportunity to make an impact in someone's life, wherever and however that might be. And so that's what I would say, is, for someone starting off is find what you love, learn a bunch of skills, do everything you can to figure out who you are and also be comfortable with who you are. Yeah. You know, I would say that in many cases earlier in my life, I felt less than from the get.
Yeah.
From the start, I had more of a scarcity mentality around what my potential was versus someone else. And I would look at someone else who was taller or more handsome or more fit and, feel like inferior.
Why do you think that was? Where do you think it?
I don't know if I was wired that way. I don't know if that's just the way I came or if I was just aware of the fact that, I was really psychological question.
That's why I asked it.
Yeah. I think maybe I was just a little, I had not worked through the tools of proper self-talk. And if there's anything I try and teach my kids is be really protective of what ideas you let come into your mind and how you talk about yourself to yourself is the biggest limiter of your success.
It reminds me of one of my favorite books. I read it pretty frequently, actually. It's short, so it helps, and I read it in sections, but As a Man Thinketh. And, he says a mind is like unto a garden that whatever you do, that it will bring forth.
Yeah.
It will grow something.
Yeah.
It will grow either weeds or it will grow fruit.
One of my favorite quotes is Henry Ford, whether you can or you can't, you're right.
Right, exactly.
And whatever you believe you can do, you can accomplish. And we limit ourselves the most. And so it probably wasn't till I was about 34 or 35 that I really just accepted me for me.
Do you think that was your dad involved, do you think, early on in kind of how you saw the world? Do you feel like he was available enough to sort of coach you through those aspects of your life and how you thought about things, or would that have been a little bit more your mom?
I'm not sure, to just 100% transparent. I would say that was not something that we really discussed a whole lot.
Interesting.
If anything, he was gone a lot for work. Mm-hmm. And there was more of a so-and-so's against me. Yeah. And so it's I would say that I had to learn as an adult how to wire the brain for abundance.
I think a lot of people, did. I mean, our generation of parents were raised by the Depression generation of parents, right?
The scarcity was very standard.
Yeah. And, our generation of grandparents, were Depression,
yes.
World War II. And it was very much we just went through maybe some of the world's worst atrocities and we survived and we're all good now. Now let's move right into the 50s and we're all happy, right? And so let's sweep everything under the rug, right?
And I think that's if I'm playing the psychologist, it's that the most destructive thing was the sweep everything under the rug, and we don't discuss our failures, our frailties, and we always put on a good face.
Yeah.
I would like to think I'm more transparent about what are the hard things with my kids. I hope that they know that they can come to me with their issues instead of feeling like, oh, don't tell me about how you messed up. Don't tell me how you're imperfect.
Totally. What's funny is kids have insane intuition. The things we try to hide from them, they know. 100%. They always know, right? It's how many times do you hear teenagers and their parents come to them and say, "We're getting a divorce." You're like, finally. Or I've known.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, that it's very cool, I think, as an adult, to get to a point in our lives where we can start to better understand how we tick and why. And it's very fascinating to me, actually. So thanks for sharing that. And, it's cool, generation by generation, right? I always joke with my wife because we have small children and we always think about all right, what do we need to do and adjust and change for our kids, to make it better for them. And, and we'll read something from some influencer that says, oh, you should do X and Y and you'll get a better result. And I'm like, nobody knows shit. Wait 20 years and then we'll find out how that went,
And whose definition of better, right? What better are we solving for? Yeah. Is it better vacations? Is it better toys in the house? Or is it better long-term outcomes?
Yeah. And the problem is a lot of it is very, very lagging indicators, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I think as parents and leaders, I think it's very relevant as leaders in general in community, business, whatever. It's like there are so many ways to do things, and we will find out later what we could have done better.
Yeah.
The
one other plug I just want to put before we wrap is like How Will You Measure Your Life is a book by Clayton Christensen.
Oh yeah.
And if there's any like thing that I would consider required reading for somebody who's trying to figure this out, is How Will You Measure Your Life? He tells the story about his HBS classmate who was Jeffrey Skilling, and he was the CEO of Enron. Mm-hmm. He never decided or strategically said, I want to have a life where I end up in jail and everyone in my life hates me. But he executed that strategy.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you look at what matters most to you? And when I think about my economics major, what I like about it the most is it allows me to think about success across multiple variables. My relationships, my like career, my children, my friends, like and like my faith, like how do I look at all of these things together? Because I see so many guys and so many adults who, I'll just say adults, but like so many people who optimize for success in one bucket and let the other ones fail because it's the one that they get the most immediate gratification. You talked about kids, because that's something that Christensen says. He's like, it's hard for us to properly put the right amount of energy into parenting because you don't know, it's a lagging indicator 20 years later, how it turned out.
Yeah.
But your career, you immediately know if you got the bonus or if you got the next round or whatever.
Think about it, right? Like we talk a lot about challenges that make you grow, right?
Yeah.
What is the harder thing? The harder thing is to manage it all, right? As opposed to just going all in. And in fact, just this morning, I was checking the stock market, and the CEO of NVIDIA, like the headline news was the CEO of NVIDIA is admitting that his life is imbalanced right now and that he's only working. It's just funny, the choices that we make. I think that the easier route is to just kind of default everything else to not working. And I think there's seasons of life, right?
Yeah.
I remember at that dinner with Blake Murray, I was there, and he was talking about, at certain points in my life, I just worked more, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean he was completely unavailable for his children.
But he knew there was limited time for other things.
For sure. There was balance at certain points. Unfortunately, in some ways, we won't know how everything plays out as far as it goes along, but, we could still have some aspect of faith of just doing our best. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, much love.
Cool. Thank you for listening to today's episode of No Instructions. Feel free to leave us a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe so we can continue producing these podcasts. Today's episode was brought to you by Distro. Distro is a platform to help startups find, hire, and pay employees in over 200 countries. It's free to use. Go to distro.io to set up your free account today.